Admiral Dahyun stood at the viewing window of her ship, watching the blue planet called Earth grow larger. Her silver uniform reflected the starlight as she studied the data screens floating around her. Something about the human military reports didn't make sense. "Jai-ho," she called to her cultural analyst, "come look at these combat statistics again." Jai-ho walked over, his steps quiet on the ship's smooth floor. He was younger than the admiral, but his eyes showed the wisdom of someone who had studied many species. "What caught your attention, Admiral?" he asked, adjusting his glasses. "Look at their special forces units, their most effective warriors. Many of them are females with offspring." Dahyun pointed to a particular file. "This one, Commander Haenul, has 3 children, yet her combat scores are among the highest we've ever seen." Jai-ho nodded slowly. "Yes, most species consider having children a reason to step back from combat roles. But humans seem different." The ship's AI announced their approach to Earth's space station. Through the window, they could see the station, a simple structure compared to Federation standards, but impressive for such a young species. "Welcome to Earth Station 1. A warm voice came through the communicator. "This is Commander Haenul. I'll be your security liaison during your stay." Dahyun exchanged looks with Jai-ho. This was the very warrior they had just been discussing. When they docked, Haenul met them at the airlock. She was shorter than Dahyun expected, with kind eyes and a gentle smile that seemed out of place on someone with her combat record. She wore a simple blue uniform with minimal decorations, though Dahyun knew each small pin represented extraordinary achievements. "Admiral, welcome to Earth," Haenul said, bowing slightly. "I hope your journey was comfortable." As they walked through the station, Dahyun noticed how the other humans responded to Haenul. They showed deep respect, but not fear. It was different from how most species treated their elite warriors. Their tour was interrupted by a beeping from Haenul's communication device. "Excuse me," she said, checking the message. Her face softened into a warm smile. "My youngest just lost his first tooth." Dahyun watched in fascination as Haenul quickly sent a message back, her entire demeanor changing for a moment. Here was one of humanity's deadliest warriors, getting excited about a child's tooth. Later, in the diplomatic meeting room, Dahyun studied the human security teams. Nearly half were parents, according to their files. The Federation had always believed that having children made warriors softer, less effective. But these humans seemed to draw strength from their family connections. "Jai-ho," Dahyun whispered, "I think we need to revise our understanding of combat effectiveness." "Agreed," Jai-ho replied, taking notes. "There's something about human parents, especially their mothers, that we don't understand yet." As they discussed trade agreements and military cooperation, Dahyun kept thinking about Haenul's reaction to her child's message. There was something there, a kind of power that the Federation had never considered. The meeting ended with the scheduling of joint military exercises. As they prepared to leave, Dahyun saw Haenul video calling her children, promising to be home for dinner. The same hands that could disable an enemy craft were now making silly faces at a young child. "Admiral," Jai-ho said quietly, "I believe we've discovered something important here, something that could change how the entire galaxy thinks about warriors." Dahyun nodded, watching Haenul end her call with a warm, "Mom loves you." "Yes," the Admiral replied. "I think we have much to learn from these humans, especially their mothers." Federation anthropologist Taiwan sat across from Commander Haenul in the space station's interview room. The walls were plain white, but Haenul had insisted on having plants in the room to make it feel more welcoming. She said it reminded her of her garden at home. "Commander, thank you for agreeing to this interview," Taiwan said, setting up his recording device. "We're trying to understand something that seems unique to humans." Haenul smiled, holding her cup of coffee. "Please, just call me Haenul. What would you like to know?" "Our data shows that human parents, especially mothers, perform exceptionally well in combat situations. This goes against everything we've observed in other species. Could you help us understand why? Newell thought for a moment, watching the steam rise from her cup. Have you ever heard humans talk about mom strength? Taiwan shook his head, leaning forward with interest. There are stories throughout human history of mothers lifting vehicles to save their children, running into burning buildings, fighting off dangerous animals. Newell's eyes grew distant. Most humans thought these were just stories until we developed ways to measure what happens to us in those moments. She pulled up a holographic display showing brain scans. When a human parent, especially a mother, perceives a threat to their child, something changes in us. We access strength and speed we didn't know we had. Our minds become sharper. Pain matters less. Fear becomes irrelevant. Taiwan typed rapidly on his tablet. And this carries over to combat situations. Yes, but it's more than that. Newell stood and walked to the window, looking out at Earth below. When I had my first child, many thought my combat career was over. Instead, my performance scores improved. Being a mother didn't make me softer. It gave me something more precious to protect. She turned back to Taiwan. In combat, I'm not just fighting for myself, or even my mission. I'm fighting to get home to my children. And more than that, I'm fighting to protect everyone's children. But doesn't having children create a vulnerability? Taiwan asked. A weakness enemies could exploit. Newell's expression changed subtly. The warmth was still there, but now Taiwan could see why she was considered one of Earth's deadliest warriors. Caring for others isn't weakness. It's the source of our greatest strength. She sat back down, her movement smooth and controlled. Last month, my team rescued hostages from pirates. One of them was clutching a stuffed animal her mother had given her. At that moment, I wasn't just a soldier following orders. I was every mother who had ever worried about their child. That's what your combat data is picking up. Not just trained responses, but the most powerful protective instinct in human biology. Taiwan's tablet was full of notes now. This is fascinating. But how do you balance being both warrior and mother? Newell smiled again, pulling up a photo of her children. I don't balance them. They're the same thing. Being a mother means protecting those who need protection. Being a warrior means having the skills to do it effectively. Her communication device beeped. Another message from home. My oldest made dinner for her siblings tonight, she said proudly. She's learning to protect and care for others in her own way. Taiwan watched as Newell quickly sent back a loving message. In that moment, he understood something profound about humans. Their greatest warriors weren't great despite being mothers. They were great because they were mothers. One last question, he said. What do you think about when you're in combat? Newell's answer was simple. I think about making the galaxy safer for all children, not just my own. That's what being a mom means. The diplomatic summit was going well until it wasn't. Newell stood at her post near the main entrance, watching the delegates discuss trade agreements. Her daughter Sua, visiting the station during her school break, sat quietly in the observer section, taking notes for a school project. The first sign of trouble was subtle. A slight change in the air pressure as unauthorized ships docked with the station. Newell noticed it before the alarm sounded. Security breach in sectors 3 and 4, the station's AI announced calmly. Newell was already moving. She activated her comm unit while signaling her team. This is Commander Newell. Protect the delegates. Hostile forces have entered the station. The doors burst open. Masked figures in black armor rushed in, weapons ready. Their leader shouted demands in multiple languages, but Newell wasn't listening. She had seen one of them turn toward the observer section. Toward Sua. What happened next amazed even the Federation's combat analysts who later studied the footage. Newell moved with impossible speed. She disarmed the first attacker while simultaneously throwing her reinforced jacket to Sua for protection. The movement was so smooth it looked like a dance. Mom, Sua called out, her voice steady despite her fear. She had already helped the other observers take cover, just as Hainul had taught her. "Stay down, sweetheart," Hainul replied, her voice calm even as she fought. "Remember what we practiced." Admiral Da-hyun watched from behind a barrier as Hainul engaged multiple attackers at once. The human commander's combat style had changed from what they had observed in training. It was more efficient, more precise, and somehow faster. 3 attackers charged Hainul at once. She stepped through their attack pattern like she was walking through a garden, each movement ending with a disabled opponent. When one attacker got past her and ran toward the observers, Hainul threw a chair with perfect accuracy, knocking them unconscious before they got within 10 meters of the children's position. "Federation security forces are 5 minutes out," Jaiho reported, monitoring the situation. "They won't be needed," Da-hyun replied, watching Hainul work. The admiral was right. In less than 4 minutes, Hainul and her team had neutralized all threats. Not a single delegate or observer was harmed. The station's medical team arrived to find Hainul checking on each civilian personally, all while giving clear orders for securing the area. "Sua," Hainul called once the situation was secure. "Are you okay?" Sua emerged from cover, still wearing her mother's jacket. "I'm fine, Mom. I kept everyone calm like you taught me." She paused, then added with a small smile, "That throw with the chair was amazing." Hainul hugged her daughter tight, then turned to check on the delegates. Admiral Da-hyun approached them, her expression full of wonder. "Commander," the admiral said, "I've seen many warriors in combat, but never anything like that. Your speed, your precision. They were beyond our measured human capabilities." Hainul smiled, keeping one arm around Sua. "With respect, Admiral, you weren't watching a warrior in combat. You were watching a mother protecting her child, and everyone else's children too." Da-hyun looked at Sua, then back at Hainul. "You know," she said thoughtfully, "I think we're finally beginning to understand why humans call their most dangerous warriors Mom." Dr. Yoongi's laboratory aboard the Federation science vessel hummed with activity. Holographic displays filled the room, showing footage from the diplomatic summit incident from every angle. The scientist stood in the center, directing his team as they analyzed Commander Hainul's combat performance. "Play the sequence again," he instructed, adjusting his instruments. "Focus on the moment when the attacker moved toward the observer section." The hologram showed Hainul's movements in slow motion. Admiral Da-hyun and Ji-ho watched from the observation area, joined by Hainul herself. The commander looked slightly uncomfortable, being the subject of such intense study. "These readings are remarkable," Dr. Yoongi said, pointing to the data streams. "The moment a threat appeared near your daughter, Commander, your body underwent several dramatic changes." He brought up a detailed biological scan. "Your muscle efficiency increased by 300%. Your reaction time dropped to levels we've never recorded in any species. Your brain activity suggests you were processing information faster than our instruments could measure." Hainul looked at the readings with interest. "We've always known mothers could do extraordinary things to protect their children. We call it mom's strength. I mentioned this in the interview." "Yes, but this is different," Dr. Yoongi replied. "Your combat effectiveness didn't just increase when your daughter was threatened. It remained elevated as you protected all the civilians present. The maternal protective response expanded to cover everyone under your protection." Admiral Da-hyun stepped forward. "Could this be replicated? Could we train other species to achieve similar results?" Dr. Yoongi shook his head slowly. "The effect appears unique to humans, particularly human mothers. It's not just physical. It's a complex interaction of hormones, neural pathways, and something we don't fully understand yet." He displayed another set of scans. "Look at these readings from other human parent warriors during combat situations. The pattern is consistent. When they enter what they call mom mode, they achieve performance levels that should be impossible." "It's not just about fighting," Hainul added quietly. "It's about protecting. There's a difference." Jai-Ho, who had been taking notes, looked up. "Could you explain that difference, Commander?" "When I fight as a warrior, I focus on defeating the enemy," Haenul explained. "But when I fight as a mother, I focus on protecting everyone who needs protection. The enemy becomes almost secondary. They're just obstacles between me and keeping people safe." Dr. Yoon-Gae nodded excitedly. Yes, that's what we're seeing in the data. Your brain patterns show you weren't just fighting enemies. You were creating safe spaces, predicting threats, and moving to protect others before the threats even fully developed. He brought up one final display, showing a comparison between standard combat responses and Haenul's performance. The Federation has always trained warriors to be effective fighters, but human mothers have shown us that true combat effectiveness comes from the desire to protect, not destroy. Admiral Da-hyun watched the data streams thoughtfully. So when humans call their most dangerous warriors mom, they're not just using a title. They're acknowledging a fundamental truth about the source of true strength. Exactly, Dr. Yoon-Gae confirmed. We've been studying combat effectiveness from the wrong angle. It's not about being the strongest or the fastest. It's about having something precious to protect. And no one understands that better than a mother. Captain Myre stood before a mixed group of human and alien warriors in the new joint training facility. The training room was large and well-lit, with soft mats covering the floor. Observation windows lined one wall, where Federation officials watched with interest. "Today, we begin something new," Myre announced, her voice clear and strong. "We're not here to learn how to fight better. We're here to learn how to protect better." The alien warriors looked confused. A tall Federation officer raised his hand. "Captain, we reviewed the combat footage from Commander Haenul. Those were clearly advanced fighting techniques." Myre smiled and shook her head. "What you saw wasn't about fighting at all. It was about protection. Let me demonstrate." She turned to her assistant. "Bring in the children." The doors opened, and a group of children from various species entered the room. They were carrying toys and books, completely at ease. Myre's own daughter was among them. "These are our instructors," Myre explained. The alien warriors looked even more confused now. "Your combat instructors are children?" one asked. "No," Myre replied. "They're here to help you understand what we're protecting. The Federation has always trained warriors to defeat enemies. We're going to train you to protect families." She walked to the center of the room. "Each of you will spend time with these children. You'll learn their names, their favorite games, their dreams. Then we'll run combat simulations." Over the next few hours, the alien warriors awkwardly began interacting with the children. Gradually, something changed. The warriors became more relaxed, more engaged. Myre watched as a huge Federation soldier gently helped a small child build a tower of blocks. "Now," Myre announced after the children had left, "we'll run our first protection exercise. The scenario is simple. Get from one end of the room to the other while protecting civilians." The first few attempts were typical military maneuvers. The warriors were efficient but cold, treating the civilian holograms like objects to be moved. "Stop," Myre called out. "Remember the children you just met. Now imagine they're the ones you're protecting. Don't think about defeating the enemy. Think about keeping those children safe." The change was immediate and striking. The alien warriors moved differently now. They were more aware, more careful, but also more effective. Their movements weren't just about reaching the objective. They were about creating safe spaces. In the observation room, Admiral Da-hyun watched with growing excitement. "They're beginning to understand," she said to Haenul, who had joined her. "It's not about being a better warrior. It's about having something worth protecting." Haenul finished. "That's what makes human mothers so effective in combat. We never forget what we're fighting for." Myre continued working with the group, teaching them to tap into their protective instincts. By the end of the day, their combat effectiveness had improved significantly, but more importantly, they had begun to understand the true source of strength: "You've all taken the first step," Myray told them as the session ended. "True strength isn't about how well you can fight. It's about how deeply you care about protecting others. That's what we mean when we call our best warriors Mom." The emergency alert woke Colonel Ng from a deep sleep. The Federation colony on New Haven was under attack. As she rushed to the command center, reports flooded in about an unknown hostile species launching a surprise attack on the civilian population. "Status report," Ng demanded as she entered the control room. The screen showed chaos across the colony's main city. 3 enemy ships appeared without warning, her second-in-command reported. "They've already landed ground forces. Local defenses are overwhelmed. Civilian casualties are expected to be high." Ng's expression hardened. "Deploy the Parent Warrior Unit. All of them." The Parent Warrior Unit was new, created after the Federation had learned about human mothers' combat effectiveness. Every member was a parent, trained in the protective combat techniques that Myray and Haynul had developed. Within minutes, 5 transport ships launched from the response station. Yunjai led them, her mind already planning protection zones around the colony's schools and residential areas. "Remember your training," she spoke to her team over the comm. "We're not here to win a battle. We're here to protect families. Think of your own children at home." The transport ships landed in different sectors of the city. Yunji's team touched down near a school where hundreds of colonists had taken shelter. Enemy forces were closing in fast. "Team 2, secure the hospital," Yunji ordered. "Team 3, protect the residential zones. Team 4, evacuate the recreation center. Team 5, defend the power plant. My team will hold this position." The response was immediate and coordinated. Each team moved with the special awareness that came from parental instincts. They didn't just fight the enemy. They created safe spaces, guided civilians to shelter, and protected evacuation routes. Yunji's team transformed the school into a fortress. They didn't just defend it. They made it feel safe for the frightened children inside. Team members told stories to keep the young ones calm between attacks, all while maintaining perfect combat readiness. In the hospital sector, Team 2 worked with incredible efficiency. They helped medical staff move patients to secure areas while holding off enemy forces. Their protective instincts made them think 3 steps ahead, anticipating threats before they developed. The enemy forces, despite their superior numbers, began to fall back. They couldn't understand why their usual tactics weren't working. They would breach a defense line only to find another, stronger one behind it. Every time they thought they had an advantage, the human defenders would surprise them with another layer of protection. "Colonel," one of her team reported, "the enemy is retreating to their ships. All civilian zones are secure. Casualties are minimal." Yunji nodded, still holding a small child who had been separated from his parents. "Maintain defensive positions until the all clear, and someone find this little one's family." Later, when Federation analysts studied the battle, they were amazed. The Parent Warrior Unit had not only repelled an enemy force 3 times their size, but had done so while keeping civilian casualties near 0. Admiral Dahyun arrived the next day to assess the situation. She found Yunji helping children draw pictures to decorate the school's makeshift shelter. "The Federation Council is impressed," Dahyun said. "This is the most effective defensive operation we've ever seen." Yunji smiled gently at the children. "We succeeded because we fought like parents, not warriors. Every child here reminded us of our own children at home. We didn't just defend the colony. We protected our extended family." Admiral Dahyun stood before the Federation Council, her uniform crisp and neat. The Great Hall was full of representatives from every member species. Commander Haynul stood beside her, ready to help present their findings. "The success at New Haven proves what we've learned from human mother warriors," Dahyun began. "Our entire approach to military training needs to change." She showed videos from the colony defense, comparing old combat methods with the new protective techniques. The difference was clear to everyone watching. Traditional warrior training focuses on defeating enemies, Haynul explained. But our parent warriors focus on protecting people. This makes them more effective, not less. An old council member raised his hand. But how can we apply this? Not all species share human maternal instincts. That's what we thought too, Dahyun replied. But Captain Myray's training program has shown that all species can learn to fight from a protective mindset. It's not about being a biological mother. It's about learning to care deeply about protecting others. The screen showed scenes from Myray's training center. Alien warriors played with children, learned about families they were protecting, and transformed their fighting styles. Our new training program has 3 main parts, Haynul continued. First, warriors spend time with civilians, especially children. They learn to see the people they protect as real individuals, not just numbers to defend. She changed the display. Second, they learn to think like protectors, not just fighters. Every move they make is about keeping others safe, not just defeating enemies. Third, Dahyun added, they learn to tap into their protective instincts during combat. The results speak for themselves. The screen showed combat effectiveness scores. The new parent warrior units consistently performed better than traditional military units, with fewer civilian casualties and better mission success rates. But it goes beyond combat, Haynul said softly. These warriors return home as better parents, better community members. They understand protection in a deeper way. Over the next few hours, the council asked questions and reviewed data. Scientists presented research about how protective instincts improved combat performance across all species. Medical teams showed how the new approach reduced mental trauma in warriors. By evening, the council had reached a decision. The Federation would rebuild its entire military doctrine around the protective principle. Every warrior would now train in what they called the Mother's Way. After the meeting, Dahyun found Haynul in the garden outside, video calling her children. The galaxy will never be the same, Dahyun said when Haynul finished her call. Haynul smiled. It will be better. We're not just changing how we fight. We're changing why we fight. Every warrior will now understand what mothers have always known. True strength comes from protecting others. Back at the training center, Myray watched as her newest class of warriors, humans and aliens together, learned to think like parents protecting their children. They moved differently now, fought differently. The revolution isn't in our weapons or tactics, she told her students. It's in our hearts. When you fight to protect, you tap into something stronger than any weapon. A parent's love. 20 years had passed since the Federation first learned about human mother warriors. Sua, Commander Haynul's daughter, now stood in the same training center where her mother had once taught. She wore the silver uniform of a Federation instructor, with a special pin that marked her as both a warrior and a mother. The graduation ceremony for the newest class of parent warriors filled the Great Hall. Representatives from 30 different species stood in formation, each wearing the symbol of protective service, a simple image of open hands cradling a star. Admiral Dahyun, now with silver hair but still sharp-eyed, sat in the front row beside an older Haynul. They watched as Sua addressed the graduates. 20 years ago, the galaxy learned something important from human mothers. Sua began. They learned that true strength comes from protecting others. Today, we don't just train warriors, we train protectors. The screens behind her showed images from the past 2 decades. Federation ships arriving to help planets in crisis. Mixed species units working together to evacuate civilians from natural disasters. Parent warriors teaching children from all species how to stay safe. The title of mom has become something special across the galaxy, Sua continued. It's not just about being a parent anymore. It's about being someone who protects, who nurtures, who makes the universe safer for everyone. She gestured to the graduates. Each of you has learned to tap into your protective instincts. You've spent time with families from different species. You've learned that victory isn't about defeating enemies. It's about keeping people safe. In the audience, Hanul watched her daughter with pride. Sua had grown up watching her mother protect others. Now she was teaching those same principles to a new generation. The old ways of war are fading, Sua told the graduates. In their place, we have something better. When threats come, we don't just fight them. We create safe spaces. We protect the vulnerable. We act like parents protecting their children. After the ceremony, families gathered to celebrate. Young children from many species played together while their parent warrior guardians watched over them. The scene would have been unthinkable 2 decades ago. Did you ever imagine this? Dahyun asked Haenul as they watched Sua with her own young daughter. I hoped for it. Haenul replied. Every time I fought to protect someone, I dreamed of a galaxy where all warriors understood what mothers have always known. Sua joined them, carrying her daughter. The little girl wore a toy version of the protective service pin. Mom, Sua said to Haenul, my daughter asked me today what it means to be a warrior. What did you tell her? Haenul asked. I told her what you taught me. Sua smiled. Being a warrior isn't about being the strongest or the fastest. It's about having something precious to protect. That's why the galaxy's best defenders are called Mom. As the sun set outside the training center, 3 generations of protectors stood together. Around them, the newest class of parent warriors began their journey, carrying forward a legacy that had transformed the galaxy. They had learned that the strongest warriors weren't those who fought with anger or hatred, but those who fought with a parent's love.